Omicron has made it abundantly clear that it doesn't matter how militantly you mask up, you can and will get COVID. Doesn't matter if you practice social distancing and wash your hands and avoid eating out, you can and will get COVID. Doesn't matter if you go full Karen and bark at random people on the subway that are standing too close to you, or remind that 3-year-old seated next to you on a plane that they really need to cover their nose with that mask, you can and will get COVID. The virus is not a moral failing. The sinners and the righteous will get it in equal measure. I don't know how your holidays went, but mine were full of hastily rescheduled and or canceled plans due to various family members, some quite close to me, colleagues and friends succumbing to Omicron. Virtually everybody I know who caught it this time around was vaccinated, if not boosted, and had a mild bout with the illness. Some of those people were super cautious and reluctant to attend social gatherings. Others have been partying like it's 2019. Guess what? Doesn't matter. This variant is so transmissible that you can't good person yourself out of getting it. Indeed, some of the deluded COVID-0 zealots are realizing that. Here's CNN's Leanna Wen, a militant supporter of COVID restrictions who thinks the unvaccinated should essentially be prevented from traveling at all, admitting that the cloth masks are frankly a joke.
Wearing a 3-ply surgical mask, don't wear a cloth mask. Cloth masks are little more than facial decorations. There's no place for them in light of Omicron. And so wear a high-quality mask, at least a 3-ply surgical mask. And if you're going to be visiting elderly relatives or immunocompromised people after, wait 3 days, get tested, and then see those vulnerable people.
She's right. Now, Wen's solution is to force everyone to wear even more elaborate masks at all times, which is insane. Enough is enough. All you can do is get vaccinated and urge others to do the same, not because the vaccine protects against infection, we all know it doesn't, but because the vaccine means you'll have a milder case than you would have otherwise. Ironically, one of the public figures who really seems to get it right now is someone I'm not exactly accustomed to praising, former President Donald Trump. Here he is promoting voluntary vaccination on Candace Owens' show.
Now we went from this is a good thing and people should have this option to military men, you're going to have to resign because you're not getting this vaccine. Where do you stand on that?
Well, I stand on forget about the mandates that people have to have their freedom. But at the same time, the vaccine is one of the greatest achievements of mankind. We would have had in 1917, remember the Spanish flu, killed perhaps 100 million people. Actually, it ended the First World War because the soldiers were so. A lot of people don't know that. The soldiers got so sick. It was a terrible thing. There were no vaccines. There was no anything. I came up with a vaccine, with 3 vaccines. All are very, very good. Came up with 3 of them in less than 9 months. It was supposed to take 5 to 12 years.
And yet more people have died under COVID this year, by the way, under Joe Biden, than under you. And more people took the vaccine this year. So people are questioning how...
Well, no, the vaccine worked, but some people aren't taking it. The ones that get very sick and go to the hospital are the ones that don't take the vaccine.
Some elements of the MAGA right want to go all in on anti-vax conspiracy, which is crazy and clearly contradicted by the data, all of which shows the vaccine's dramatically reducing hospitalization and death. And some elements of the progressive establishment want to force people to do X, Y, and Z, eviscerating their freedoms because they have an almost religious belief in the power of mass and the goodness of government coercion. Also crazy. Now, I have little desire for Donald Trump to return to the political arena, not that it matters what I think, but someone who says, get vaccinated, forget the other stuff, should be your choice, but you ought to do it, well, they're making a lot of sense.
It is naive to pretend that all basically public health decisions that have been made over the course of the COVID-19 pandemic have not been made, like out of that sort of process that Liz was describing of, different kind of parties weighing in with costs and benefits. I mean, personally, I feel like looking backwards, there's a pretty clear track record where the needs of companies, the needs of the market have basically superseded the needs, anyone else's needs throughout most of this. I think that that's kind of been the ones who have won out of that tussle. I guess what I would say is when we're weighing those costs and benefits, whose costs are actually entering that discussion, right? Even now, we're talking about the costs that airlines like Delta would take if workers were actually required to quarantine for 10 days instead of abiding by these new CDC guidelines. We're not talking about the cost to workers. Like much that's always been the case, right? Workers have been screaming throughout this pandemic that their lives matter, that their families and their safety matter, and time again they've been overruled. This time last year, the nurses union was, this time basically 9-10 months ago, the nurses union was begging Biden to not roll back the kind of mask mandate, because they were the ones seeing kind of the results in the hospitals that they were working in. And since then, like, they've been kind of reaching out to me and telling me, it's like, yeah, it's only kind of gotten worse. Right now, hospitals are at near capacity. So I'm not naive in the sense of, believing that, like, yeah, we can't just kind of say screw it to all the sort of economic costs. But, like, I think just the bare reality that is very easy to lose sight of is that we're not talking about the costs to the human beings who actually make the economy run. We're talking about the profits and, operability of companies that really see their employees as numbers, not as human beings.
Do you think that this is going to mean, spell doom for Prince Andrew?
No, I don't. I think it should, but I don't think it will. And I think that's the big takeaway from this entire trial, is that the allegations that will never make it to court, those are the ones that I think are the most telling. And in Maxwell's case, yes, there are allegations against Prince Andrew. She did not take the stand. From what we know, she is not, she's not being forthcoming with all of these other elements. Like, we're seeing the tip of the iceberg right now, and we sort of have an indication that there's something under the water that's much bigger, but we can't really see it. And this trial didn't do a whole lot to bring that forward, I think, for obvious reasons. And Prince Andrew is another one who I think the system finds a way to protect itself time and again. Now, Ghislaine Maxwell being found guilty is not the system protecting itself. That's great. This is good. This is justice for the people who were abused by her. Absolutely. But at the same time, there's so much more going on here that the trial was like so narrow as to not be helpful with and to not really touch on that. Yeah, I guess Prince Andrew, it's not good to now be having had such a close association with two convicted people. But at the same time, I think in his case, the system is very, very powerful.
Yeah, this story is one of the weirdest stories I've ever covered, because it purportedly involves so many rich and powerful people complicit in an utterly disgusting crime, something everyone on earth believes should be a crime, is a crime, and the most, the thing you should be most punished for transgressing this kind of norm. And yet, at the end of the day, we're not, none of there was not testimony, there was not evidence presented about the involvement of all these rich and powerful people we're hearing about, and we're just holding one person accountable, and we should hold them accountable, like you said, but we're holding them accountable in a more narrow sense. And I think my sense was the way to get her to give details about the involvement of other people was to kind of offer her some kind of deal. Clearly, that did not happen, or they did not decide to do that. What is your read of that choice by the prosecution?
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right. And again, it's in a sense, the narrow focus of this trial is a good thing, because it was focused on justice for these accusers, and that's great. At the same time, this was a system. They were abused by a system. They had, it was almost like a business, the way that it was run. And in fact, it may have literally been a business. We just don't know the details of that. People like Les Wexner, the Barclays guy. There's so many serious allegations about associations with people beyond just Prince Andrew, people that aren't even talked about in the media very often, that are very rich and powerful, and that had very suspect relationships with Epstein and Maxwell. And her being found guilty on these counts and going to prison for a very, very long time, that's all good. It is not helpful to uncovering the rest of what's happening below the surface, the actual iceberg itself.